Hey everybody, and welcome back, y'all. Welcome. Listen, go ahead and grab your tea or your water and just get settled. Today closes out July, and before I explain what that means, I want to open with something a lot of you have probably lived through this month, okay? July. You finally got one thing under control. Maybe it was the 2 p.m. crash. You changed how you were eating, and it worked. You don't hit that wall anymore, and for the first time in months, you get through an afternoon without needing, to lie down or lean on a third cup of coffee just to function. You told yourself, that's the thing. That's what's wrong, and now it's handled. Or maybe it was the week before your cycle. You did the work, and the bloating and the mood swings that used to flatten you finally eased up, and you actually recognized yourself in the mirror that week instead of feeling like you were watching someone else react to everything. Or maybe your thyroid panel came back looking decent. After months of chasing it, after sitting across from a doctor telling you the numbers were fine, while nothing about how you felt was fine. And you finally had a number that matched what you had been asking to believe about for months. Or maybe it was something smaller that nobody else would even notice. The joint stiffness that had been nagging at you every morning for the better part of a year has finally eased up. It's easing up. Or the anxiety that used to hit for no reason in the middle of an ordinary afternoon is finally going quiet. And you think that you would feel better, right? For a little while it does. You tell your sister or your best friend, maybe you finally feel like you can exhale for the first time in a long time. And then something else shows up. The crash is gone, but you're wide awake at midnight, staring at the ceiling, running through tomorrow's to-do list for the fourth time, wondering why your body picked now of all times to start a new problem. The bloating is better, but you're tired in a different way than before. Not sleepy, tired, like just depleted, like something's been quietly draining out of you all day, every day, no matter how much you sleep. The panel looks fine, but you still can't shake the fog by 3 p.m., and now you're wondering if you imagined the improvement in the first place, or worse, if you're just going to be chasing this forever, one symptom at a time for the rest of your life. You fixed the thing, and a new thing took its place, like it was just waiting its turn. Now listen, if that's familiar, if you felt like you're playing a whack-a-mole with your own body for a month, a year or longer, I want you to sit with something before we go further. There's one specific reason that happens, and it has nothing to do with how hard you worked on any one piece, and nothing to do with discipline or consistency or doing it right. There's one thing sitting underneath all of it, one signal that's been running the whole time while you were chasing each new symptom to the surface, addressing it, watching it quiet down, and then finding the next one already waiting. And today, on our last session for the month of July, we're going straight at it, okay? We're gonna tackle this. Y'all, this is cortisol wired, okay? The pattern that we open the month of July with, okay? So for a quick reminder, for anyone joining new today, these patterns, including cortisol wired, are educational frameworks for nutritional awareness. They are not medical diagnosis. Today, we're coming back to it, okay? Not to repeat, what we covered a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, since July, the first week of July, that replay is already there, and it walks you through that mechanism in real depth. If you want to go back and watch it, it's there. But to show you why this pattern particularly sits underneath the other three, or on the other four, we spent this month building out one Wednesday at a time, okay? So by the end of today, what I'm hoping is that you'll understand why fixing one symptom at a time keeps producing a new symptom somewhere else, what's actually connecting the blood sugar swings, the thyroid symptoms, and the estrogen-related symptoms you might have separately tried to solve this year. And y'all, this is the part I most want you to leave with today. What actually interrupts that cycle instead of just relocating it to a new part of your body? A new season, a new year. So y'all, let's go ahead and get into it, okay? Welcome everybody. So cortisol gets talked about like it's one system among several. The stress hormone lane, separate from blood sugar, separate from thyroid, separate from estrogen, each with its own specialist, its own panel, its own protocol, its own corner of the internet telling you what to do about it. That's not how your body actually runs it. Cortisol is closer to a regulatory hub than a standalone hormone. Think of it less like one department and more like the signal every other department is checking in with before it decides what to do. It touches almost every other hormonal system you have, which means when its curve is off, it doesn't stay contained to one symptom or one system. It shows up in whichever system was already under the most strain, which is exactly why the same underlying shift can look completely different from one woman to the next. And even, y'all, from one season of your own life to the next. Here's what that looks like across the three patterns. And I'm saying three, I really want to say four, but I'm going to say three that we spent on this month, because there's one we haven't touched yet. For a lot of women, insulin inflamed, the blood sugar driven pattern has a direct cortisol connection. Now, research points to cortisol spikes at the wrong time, especially overnight, prompting the liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream, which is part of why blood sugar can swing even when nothing about food has changed. Okay, now insulin inflamed is also an educational framework for nutritional awareness. Okay, this is not a diagnosis. You can get meticulous about eating for stable blood sugar, protein at every meal, no naked carbs, spacing things out exactly right, and still see swings because cortisol is generating glucose on its own schedule, on its own timeline, independent of your plate entirely. Thyroid slowed has a connection that surprises most people. Cortisol influences how your body converts T4, the storage form of thyroid hormone, into T3, the active form your cells actually use to run your metabolism. Under sustained cortisol elevation, research points to more of that conversion getting rerouted toward an inactive form instead of active T3. That's part of why a woman can have a technically normal TSH, the number most standard panels stop at, the one number that most doctors are working from, and still feel every symptom of an underactive thyroid because the number on the panel isn't capturing what's actually happening at the conversion step, several layers downstream of where the test is even looking. And estrogen stuck, another pattern, okay, ties back to the same HPA axis we mapped out in detail during week 1 of this month. The brain adrenal connection loop that determines how much cortisol gets released and when, hour by hour. When that axis stays chronically activated, it can affect how efficiently the body clears used estrogen on top of the progesterone piece we covered during that first week. For some women, that shows up as the mid-cycle bloating we talked about in week 2, For other women, it's the pre-period mood shift from that same week's Monday post. Okay, so go back and look at this. Same underlying driver, different expression, depending entirely on where the strain happens to land that particular month. Now, notice what's common to all three of those explanations. The same HPA axis, the same curve, the same signal expressing itself through three different downstream systems, depending on which one happens to be under the most pressure in a given season of your life. So here's the actual mechanism behind the whack-a-mole feeling. If cortisol is generating strain across all three systems at once, and you only ever address one system at a time, you're treating whichever symptom cortisol happens to be showing up in that particular month, while the signal producing all of them keeps running untouched underneath the surface. Address the blood sugar piece and the strain finds the thyroid conversion instead. Address that and it finds estrogen clearance. The symptom moves from system to system, looking for wherever it can express itself most easily, like water finding the lowest point in a landscape. The source stays exactly where it was the whole time. Now, a woman I worked with this year, she came to me already having done real work. She wasn't starting from zero, and I want to be clear about that up front, y'all, because so much of what I'm about to describe is not about lack of effort. If anything, it's the opposite problem. Now, if you hear my dogs, y'all, I apologize. She'd addressed her blood sugar first, cut the 3 p.m. crash almost entirely. She felt genuinely better for about 6 weeks and was proud of that, okay? As she should have been, right? She'd read, she tracked, she changed real habits. Then the fatigue got worse in a way that did not track with anything she was doing differently. So she went after her thyroid next. She worked with her doctor. She added targeted nutritional support. She watched her panel numbers actually improve on paper over the following months. And still, every night around 1 o'clock in the morning, she was wide awake, her mind going, her heart rate slightly elevated. There was no obvious trigger that she could point to. No caffeine afternoon, no screens before bed. She'd done the checklist, right? That checklist. By the time she reached out to me, she wasn't looking for another protocol. Y'all, she told me that flat out. She was tired of collecting them. What she wanted was for someone to explain why this kept happening. Not just hand her, a fourth checklist. She described it almost exactly the way I opened it up today, y'all. She said, I keep fixing the thing and something else just moves in behind it like it was waiting, right? Like it was waiting for me, Listen, she assumed that each round of visible progress meant she was getting closer to done, that eventually she'd run out of things to fix, that there was a finish line somewhere if she just kept going one symptom at a time. Instead, each time something new appeared within a matter of weeks. Like clearing one room in a house only to find the next one already a mess, no matter how thoroughly, she cleaned the last one. What we found was the same driver that had been generating all three symptoms from the start, simply showing up as a fourth expression of it, okay? Instead of us layering a fourth protocol on top of the first three, instead of finding a sleep specialist the way she found a thyroid specialist and worked on blood sugar largely on her own, we went after the cortisol curve directly using the same nervous system first sequencing we covered in detail first week of this month of July. The video is still there. Now, the wake-ups did ease within a few weeks of consistent work, but not overnight. but it was steady. But the part that actually mattered to her wasn't the timeline. It was that 4 months later, nothing new had moved. Nothing new had moved in to take their place. First time in over a year, she could say that about her own body without a mental asterisk attached, right? She told me the strangest part wasn't feeling better. It was the absence of that low hum of dread every few weeks, bracing for whatever was going to show up next. Now, what actually moves it? If you were with us the first week of July, you already have the core anchors, okay? Morning light within the first hour of waking, a protein-forward breakfast, reduced blue light in the 2 hours before bed, caffeine cutoff earlier than you think, right? Given its 6-hour plus half-life of caffeine consumption. Well, those still hold, and if you haven't put them in place yet, that's genuinely, y'all, the place to start before adding anything else. Now, I'm not going to reteach that today, okay? I'm not going back over that. What I want to add is the piece that gets missed almost every time. The middle of the day. The middle of the day. Most cortisol advice focus entirely on morning and night because that's where the curve is supposed to peak and taper most dramatically. But for a lot of women in this pattern, early to mid-afternoon is where the curve is supposed to be quietly easing down, and instead it's the exact moment a stressful email lands or a meeting runs long, or you're standing in the kitchen trying to figure out dinner while also answering 3 other things at once. And the curve spikes again, right when it should be starting its descent for the day. A 2 to 3 minute nervous system reset in that early afternoon window is not about relaxation for its own sake. And it doesn't need to look like a full meditation practice. You don't have time for it, right? Listen, stepping outside for a few minutes. Slow nasal breathing. In for 4 counts, holding it for 4, out for 6 counts. Letting the exhale run longer than the inhale, which is what actually signals the shift. Or simply stopping input entirely for a short stretch, like closing the laptop, putting the phone face down where you can't see it light up. The goal is protecting the part of the curve that's already trying to come down so it doesn't get re-elevated before it's had the chance to finish that descent. The second piece is timing your heaviest carbohydrate intake around that same early afternoon window rather than earlier or later in the day. Now, for a lot of women in this pattern, a moderate carbohydrate containing meal in the early afternoon, not a large one, it just presents something real with substance to it. This can support the natural cortisol dip that's supposed to happen there, working with the curve instead of leaving it to manage that dip entirely on its own. And the third piece, one that surprises people, y'all, weekends. If your weekday routine is dialed in, but your weekends look completely different, later mornings, skipping meals, more screen time before bed because there's no alarm forcing the cutoff, you can spend 5 days rebuilding a curve and 2 days undoing a meaningful piece of that work. It doesn't mean your weekends need to look identical to your weekdays. It means the same basic anchors, morning light, a reasonably timed first meal, and evening wind down matters on Saturday and Sunday too, even if it's in a looser form. Now, in practice, that can look as simple as getting outside within the first hour of waking, even on a slow morning, and picking a rough bedtime window you're not blowing past by 2 or 3 hours, just because there's nowhere to be the next day. The goal, y'all, is not a rigid schedule, 7 days a week. It's not handing back on the weekend what you spent the weekdays building. None of this works as an isolated fix. So, and that's exactly the point today is making, okay? Each piece, the morning light, the afternoon reset, weekend consistency, evening wind down, is being asked to do a job it was never built to do in isolation. They work as a sequence, addressing the curve at each point across the day and across the week, not as a single technique you deploy once and expect to carry the whole thing on its own, okay? Now, let's pause here. I want to hear from you directly, okay? Three things. Just drop it in the comments, okay? And whatever order they land in, there's no need for me to finish, for you to complete all three, but just drop it in the comments as they come to you. First, what's the symptom you fixed this year that got replaced by a different one? That's the first one. Second, has anything followed you through more than one round of fixing it? Like the same underlying feeling showing up in a new form, even after the original symptom genuinely improved? And then third, and this one's just for today since we're closing out this month of July, of the 4 patterns that we've covered, insulin inflamed, estrogen stuck, thyroid slowed, cortisol wired, which one landed the closest to home for you? And did anything about today change which one you picked? So those are the 3 questions. You don't have to answer all of them, just whatever comes. So y'all, here's why today didn't repeat the first week of this month, even though we're back on the same pattern that we opened the month with, cortisol wired. 3 weeks ago, we went deep on the nervous system axis itself, what the cortisol curve is supposed to do, what changes it in perimenopause, and what specifically moves it. Today was about something different, showing you why that axis sits underneath everything else we've covered in this community this month, not just underneath its own symptoms. Insulin inflamed, thyroid slowed, estrogen stuck. Every pattern we walk through this month traces back, at least in part, to this same curve running underneath whichever symptom happened to be loudest that particular week. Now that is exactly why, y'all, my tri-shift method sequences the way it does. Nervous system first, then rhythm, then nourishment. Listen, addressing rhythm or nourishment before the nervous system is regulated puts you back in the same whack-a-mole cycle that we opened up with today. So the only thing is that it's just with a more sophisticated set of tools aimed at the wrong layer of the problem. The sequence exists so the work goes toward what's actually generating the symptoms, instead of chasing wherever they happen to resurface next, month after month, indefinitely. And that's the thread running through this entire month, y'all. If you zoom all the way out, 4 patterns, 4 sets of symptoms that can look completely unrelated on the surface. One showing up as an afternoon crash, another as bloating, another as fatigue that won't lift no matter how, what your labs say, but one underlying threshold deciding how and where your body reacts in any given season. That turns 4 separate places to fix, 4 separate protocols, 4 separate rounds of hoping this is finally the one that holds, into one place to actually put the work. Now, if you've been in our community since the beginning of this month of July, you've now heard the mechanism behind 4 patterns in 4 weeks this month. So you don't need to memorize all of it today, okay? What I'd rather you leave with is so much simpler. The next time something new shows up after you thought you'd already handled the thing, you'll have a different read on it. You were addressing a symptom of something that was never fully addressed in the first place. And now you know Now you know what that something actually is. Listen, y'all, if you haven't taken my free quiz yet, that is the first step, okay? It takes about 4 minutes and it tells you where you actually sit before anything else here makes sense, actually, okay? Now, of course, I'm going to leave that in the link in the description below. If today's whack-a-mole description sounded like your last year, this year, the fixing one thing only to watch another one quietly take its place, here's where I'm going to leave this. Your body is operating by new rules. And my tri-shift protocol is how you learn exactly what they are for your specific pattern in the order that actually holds instead of the order that just moves the symptoms somewhere else. I want to thank y'all so much for being here this whole month, actually, for showing up with me week after week, dropping your comments, dropping your patterns, whether here in the community, in the comments, or in our community, and also sending a session to people that you felt like needed to hear it. Next week, we close out July's arc with the gut hormone disconnected, the pattern for anyone whose symptoms have never quite fit neatly into one category, no matter how many quizzes or panels you've tried. So same time, same place next week. If you are leaving today with more questions than you came in with, that usually means something landed. Talk to you soon. Have a great evening, y'all.